the product you learn to market is yourself when you're interviewing. You learn to market your story and you come up with a narrative. So I came up with a narrative about why I would be a good fit and why this whole world of pastoring actually isn't wasted. And I'm currently a product marketing manager at a company called Subsplash. We make an all-in-one engagement platform that right now is primarily targeted for churches, but is transferable for businesses and nonprofits. We have some schools that utilize our product. So it kind of covers everything from web development to app development to live stream to client or church management systems, really anything you need in between.
What was your background? What were you doing before?
My main career background was working in a church. My title was communities pastor. So I was basically working with small groups of people to help facilitate community, that they would pair them together to have a meal together every week, and then to help volunteer in the city some way. So some people served refugees, others would serve in foster care. And I kind of carried in that space and then everything else you would think of.
Wow. And how long did you do that for?
I think collectively, 8 years. I had some times where I was doing it at a volunteer capacity, other times at a full-time capacity, was in schooling for it that whole time. So I got my undergrad and my master's, both in biblical and theological studies.
Oh, wow. So at what point did you become interested in product marketing?
Yeah, that was a journey. There was kind of two decisions. One was the decision to not work in that church nonprofit space anymore. And then later I came to the decision on product marketing. So I left that church space truly with no idea what I was going to do next. I found myself taking a project management role on a marketing team is where I ended up. It's kind of like, all right, who can take my experience and maybe somewhat utilize it? And project management really fit that well. And I got lucky to land in marketing. So I supported our B2B, our direct to consumer, and our product marketing teams. And I remember like in my first month of that role, the senior director of marketing looked at me and said, I think as a project manager, if you did this for a year on a marketing team, you could be a marketer. And I kind of tucked that away, that confidence that, hey, if you just watch and you learn for a year, you can do it. Because I knew at the time that project maybe wasn't the long game for me, but I didn't know what was on the other side of that. So for about a year, I had that in view, that I wanted to maybe move into marketing. I watched our marketers, how they thought, how they approached problems, what they did or didn't prioritize. And along the way, I also came to really love product. So I was working in a company that was in the process of transitioning an analog product into a digital product. So trying to take something that had a lot of success in an in-person format and transferring that same power to a digital product. And there was a lot of ups and downs along the way because the company was really learning how to go digital. But regardless, it helped me fall in love with product in that journey of problem solving and adaptation, all of it. And so toward the end of my time, I was really leaning in with our product marketing team. So I was supporting B2B and direct to consumer. Product marketing kind of became like my special group. I was essentially a scrum master. And I'd be sitting in these ideations and I would get carried away with ideas about product marketing. Like it's like the scrum master hat left and I started putting on and thinking like a product marketer. I was chiming in about how do we increase adoption and how could we ascend customers from where they start, which was like a free tier, into a paid tier, and how can we show customers value? Like I would get an hour into the meeting and realize I've been the voice, not of agile principles, but of a product marketer. And it was about that time, two important conversations happened. One was my friend Grant Duncan, who's the VP of marketing at Zingtree. And I was kicking around, jumping into another project manager role, and knowing I wanted to break in marketing eventually, he kind of just stopped me. He's like, well, why not now? It was essentially asking, why are you waiting to make the jump? Just make the jump now. And the second conversation was with Nick Bogardus, who is the VP of marketing and leadership at Subsplash, where I'm working now. And I messaged him about two open roles, both a product manager role and a product marketing manager role. And he said, hey, we should definitely talk about that product marketing role because that's on my team. And as we had that conversation, he was starting to paint this picture of how a PMM uses words to create stories and messages about a product, how so much of product marketing lies in the power of words and how you're able to take words and actually paint a picture in your customer's mind. And I've always loved words. That was something that came from kind of that pastoral experience of writing and teaching. And how he also talked about how PMM kind of sits at this intersection of product and marketing. And at that point, something kind of just clicked. Like, regardless of whether it was at Subsplash, I think that's the direction I wanted to move. My love for words, and product, and marketing, my recent experience, all coming together. So I sort of got sold on the discipline in that call. And I applied for the role that night, went through the interview journey where I worked my butt off, prepping for it, and I got the role.
How long were you in a project management role before you made that jump?
The senior director of marketing at the time said 1 year would be kind of what I needed. I did it in about 10 months. And not as a flex. It happened sooner than I thought it could happen. Like I honestly thought that it would be too early to break in. But no, I was proven wrong. I'm really grateful.
In the process of transitioning from project management to product marketing, can you walk us through how you prepare for the interviews and what that interview process looked like?
As far as prep goes, I am a diehard proponent of creating a huge Google Doc where you write out every possible question you can get asked. And then you actually rehearse and write word for word answers. So I had probably about a 40-page doc that I had drawn up. That was just my answers. As far as how I got those, I'm grateful for Google. Google is your friend. Following your channel was really helpful at that time. So I was starting to watch some of your videos on how to interview and prep for that. So I drew similar preparation there. I actually used one of your paradigms in one of my interview questions. You talk about connecting the user to the magic and magic to the user in that kind of like circular paradigm. So I used that in an interview question. In addition to that, I tried to give myself a crash course on product marketing and marketing in general. Like, people talk about the T-shaped marketer. So I knew, I'm like, all right, my downward T is product marketing. So I started listening to anything I can from the Product Marketing Alliance, from Refine Labs. I really dove into their State of Demand Gen and also their Stacking Growth podcasts. Those podcasts were super helpful. But that's a long way of saying I had something where I had a substantial knowledge gap. And in a couple of weeks' time, you can hustle and learn a lot. And I did. And I just try to take in as much as I can, because I'm like, they're giving me the chance and I wanted to show up well. So that's a little bit of what prep looked like. Process was recruiter interview, which is mostly like a flyover check, and then first interview with the hiring manager. And that's where we started to get a little bit into the competencies, but it was really broad. So after that first interview with the hiring manager, they assigned me a project, which was basically to write a go-to-market strategy and then a series of back-to-back interviews from different people in different roles. So the most kind of pressing one was one with my direct leader and the other product marketing manager on my team. And that's when they started to dig in a lot on how I'm thinking about go-to-market and what I like about product marketing and what are the skills you need to become a product marketer. I interviewed with our product managers. So they're also asking questions about how I think about product, and they're wanting to understand what role I've had in it, the lenses I have, and then ultimately with senior leadership. So there was kind of a span of interviewing with everyone I would work with. And once I got through that gauntlet, it was an executive interview and the offer.
Sounds like a really complete process. So you had phone interview, hiring manager chat, go-to-market.
Yes.
And then you had the cross-functional team interviews, and then you had senior execs at the very end. Can you walk through what each of those orgs were looking for from you? Product, marketing, and sales.
Marketing, I was being interviewed mostly with the product marketer, but I sat with our creative director and our content marketer, and they were wanting to really hear from me, help me connect the dots on how your experience transfers to this experience. So there's a lot of, the product you learn to market is yourself when you're interviewing. You learn to market your story and you come up with a narrative. So I came up with a narrative about why I would be a good fit and why this whole world of pastoring actually isn't wasted. And it's really handy in my current, what this role could be. That was probably the biggest one. And that was true for all three seats. Sales had questions about what have you done for sales enablement in your past role, or what have you seen done for sales enablement? And again, I was in project, but I knew backwards and forwards some of what the team had done. Product was curious about kind of what product launches I've seen and what I could speak to. So I was fortunate enough that my seat, I had exposure and I had experiences that I could point to, even if I didn't drive the product launch, but I knew enough about it. And I didn't drive all the sales enablement, but I knew enough about it and could speak to it and speak strategy behind it. So it felt like everyone was going to know, hey, how do you have experience that impacts my part of the ecosystem?
What was the hardest part about the process for you?
Probably the hardest part of the process is more a psychological game of not second guessing yourself all the way through it. It's one thing if I was in product marketing, jumping to another product marketing seat. But I think as someone who's trying to make that jump and break into this career that I knew like is competitive, I know a lot of people want to break into product marketing. For me to not short sell my experience and to say, all right, I've gotten this far for a reason, was almost half the battle. I mean, I put in a lot of sweat and tears in terms of like the learning side, but that was the most time consuming. It's just like the prep. It was a job on top of my job for that month. It was about a month-long interview process. And so I would say if you're serious about it and you're trying to make up for that gap, you will have to give a lot of time to learn. That was the most time consuming part for sure.
Now that you're in this PMM role, what are you looking forward to doing the most?
I think I'm stepping into my company at a time where a lot of our products are moving to a place of maturity right now. And so there's going to be this opportunity to retake those parts of our product to market. And so for me, the part that's most exciting for me about product marketing is positioning and crafting a story around the product. So that knowing that opportunity is waiting for us is really cool. And I think also like being new, something I've been really stoked by about this company is my normal demeanor would be come in and just don't say much for a while. Like come in, like learn the ropes, assume that there's people who've been here longer than you. And that's all true. There's a lot of thought and intention that goes into a good marketing team. But my direct leader really pushed me. She's like, I want your feedback now. Like give your critiques now because you have fresh eyes. And so there's something there. I'm kind of in this phase right now where yes, I'm learning a lot about our product. And there's a lot of questions I'll raise where there's good answers and thoughts behind why we don't do it this way, why we do it that way. And then there's some stuff where it's like, hey, you had fresh eyes and you got to shine a light on something that's maybe like a dusty corner that someone hasn't gotten to touch. And so it's those two things together, like the long game, positioning, crafting a story, short game is getting to see maybe some quick wins just because I have the fresh set of eyes.
That's all the questions I had. Thank you so much, Collin, for sharing about your story, your process, and leaving us with some great advice.
Yeah, likewise, Henry. I appreciate your work. I mean, this started out of I don't know if we gave this context, this started out of a LinkedIn message that I had followed some of your work and seen some of what you've been posting on YouTube. And as I was interviewing, I shot you a message on LinkedIn. Said, hey, I have an interview for a product marketing role. Thank you. And then I came back later after I got the role and was able to say, thanks for the part you played. So thank you for that. I'm happy to help and return the favor where I can.